Hello and welcome to Newsmakers on CHCH Podcast. I'm your host, Louie Butko, and today I'm pleased to be joined by Hamilton Ward 2 Councillor Kroetsch. Cameron and his partner first moved to Hamilton in 2014 and have called it home ever since. A graduate of the University of Toronto with a master's from Western University, Kroetsch first ran for council in 2018, finishing second in a tightly contested race. He ran again in 2022, this time defeating the three-time incumbent councillor to win the seat, and he's with me here today. And Councillor Kroetsch, I joked before he came in, it's not often that the Newsmakers name of this show really reflects the cast every time, but you're certainly a newsmaker today. The Police Services Board has filed a complaint against you, has led it to an investigation. What is it specifically they are alleging that you did and why it was wrong?
Yeah, the board complained or started the complaint process through the chair in November of last year. And the complaint centered around my public comments on the budget process primarily. So as everyone knows, I was pretty vocal about my concerns about how the board was conducting its budget committees, how the process was going down, that it needed more transparency and accountability, and the council ought to take a role in that. And the board didn't think I should be making those comments publicly. I also then, through the budget process, was interviewed several times by the media and, again, made comments that they didn't think I should be making. None of the comments anyone has ever said are untrue, right? So I was just speaking the truth and letting people know what the facts were. But the board didn't like that, so they filed a complaint. They also alleged that I shouldn't be moving motions at council with respect to the budget. It's a bit of a weird complaint.
Doesn't it need to be approved by council? Like, isn't that the whole part? Like, it's approved by the board, then it goes to council. Doesn't council get the final say on the budget anyway, though?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I say it's weird is because one of the main functions of being a decision maker or being a city councillor and being involved in government is you put motions on the floor, and those motions are then debated and voted on. The motion itself, or placing the motion on the table, isn't the act that people should be concerned about. It should be the outcome of that motion. Right? It's great that we have people doing that, bringing motions forward, but when 12 people vote to send the budget back to the police, that ought to be the thing that people are talking about or are concerned about or have questions about. And another member of the board, the mayor, also voted in favor of sending it back. So there's this sort of differential treatment happening where I'm being complained about for doing this activity, meanwhile others are not. So this is where it gets weird, and where I say, hey, I kind of shrug my shoulders and say, I don't understand why they felt the need to complain about this. I said that they shouldn't, and I asked them not to, and they proceeded anyway.
Have you felt that there's been a target on your back since you've joined the Police Services Board?
I wouldn't say I felt there's a target on my back, but I certainly feel that when I'm saying things or when things are being said in a challenging or critical tone, that there's a lot of pushback. And I've tried to bring things up and been told, no, you can't ask questions on that by the chair. The chair has shut parts of meetings down, and the chair has actually made warnings about me personally in public. And so certainly that's not behavior I enjoy or like, and it's also behavior that I don't think should be happening at the board. But I wouldn't go as far as to say that I feel like I have a target on my back. I just feel that that criticism is not welcome, which is, again, a part of my job.
Yeah, so you've submitted a request for a judiciary review. You say the complaint and the subsequent investigation is unreasonable and have arrived at a procedurally unfair manner. How so?
Well, the process through which a complaint happens, and I think everyone understands this idea, is you're the complainant, you have somebody who you're complaining about, and you ought to really stay out of the discussion about whether or not that complaint gets filed, whether or not the complaint is validated. But unfortunately, in this case, the complaint did not stay out of it. And that muddied the situation. I also think that some of the things that were complained about in this complaint were from a previous complaint also that was dismissed. So when you have the board saying, we dismiss this, we don't think this is a credible complaint, and then portions come back as part of a second complaint, again, that's not how you use a process. That's literally what the idea of vexatious is. That you would come forward and you would say, I'm going to repeat a previously dismissed claim as part of a new complaint. So that's part of what's going on there behind the scenes, and I talked about it in the judicial review. Just to be clear, though, I've withdrawn that review now because the decision maker is no longer the board, it's now the OCPC. So I'm going to wait till they make a decision, and then if I want to pursue something, I might in the future.
Is this something, I mean, are you out of pocket? I mean, this is obviously a distraction. This is obviously something you don't want to be going through. You'd rather serve on the board that you were chosen to serve on.
Definitely.
So where do you go from here? How do you continue?
Right now, it's up to the OCPC to conduct an investigation. And so I'm just going to take their lead. Right now, they've said to us, you have the right to submit some documents or a response to this if you want. We have a deadline for that later this month. And then from there, we wait to hear back from them. And of course, it is a distraction. It takes away from the work that I've been trying to do with the board, that I've been trying to do on council, and to bring some of that transparency, accountability to the discussion around the budget. I mean, it's the largest portion of the city's budget. It should be, as far as I'm concerned, a no-brainer to have public discussions about that. And instead, I find that everything is being done to kind of constrain those discussions or move them away from public view, which is too bad.
Even the line-by-line steps that you took, just to try and save X amount of dollars, do you feel like... I watched that meeting. They were very quickly dismissed, line by line by line, by the same vote every time. What did you get out of that? What did you hope people took away from that? Because nothing came of it. It was a lot of work on your part to go line by line to find out where you could save X amount of dollars, X amount of dollars. What did you take out of it, and what did you hope people that were watching the process play out took out of it?
Well, I did that work, honestly, with member Angeline Menezes, who was appointed by the city to sit on the police board, because we thought these things were some of the low-hanging fruit. These were some of the more obvious issues. These are things the public had been talking about for sometimes decades that needed to be reformed. So we thought, well, put them on the table. We'll do our best work as we can in the time allotted, because it was a quick turnaround that we had to get those before us, and thought, you know what? Maybe these won't be received completely with open arms, but perhaps there's something in here that we could see the board come forward with their own amendments and say, maybe we don't want to do this here, but we could amend it to say this and find a savings here. One of them was a really, I thought, easy thing to do, which was we copy and pasted the city's own reserve spending strategy. We said the city's going to spend a bunch of money from its reserves to keep the tax amount lower. Let's have the same model be used at the police service. And again, it was outright dismissed. So that was really confusing for me, because we have members of council who voted in favor of that reserve spending strategy, voting against it at the police board. So that was surprising to me. The goal really was, let's get some motions on the table. That's really our job as police service board members, and any board member, is to put motions on the table and try to do something. So the goal was, let's try and reduce some of our spending. Let's do exactly what city council is doing. They set a 4% cap. So the motion was, let's see if we can get to that number. Seems pretty reasonable to me. And for them to dismiss everything, including some policy and reporting motions, outright, said it all as far as I'm concerned.
All right, Police Services Board, that obviously is not going away, so I'm sure we'll come back to that in a later conversation down the road. But let's talk about council, and this council specifically. Here we are into year 2 now. You get a feel for the job. You've been through a few budget processes. Having, ran in 2018, knowing what to expect in 2022, what have you learned in this last, 16 months on the job of actually being a councillor versus what you were doing before, which was that community activism, the union building? What's different for you?
Honestly, a lot of the work is similar in terms of communicating in public. And so really talking about what I'm doing and trying to be transparent about what I'm doing, those things have been things I've always done. So I think that there's a through line there in terms of wanting to communicate in public, keeping people informed, letting them know what's happening in Ward 2 or elsewhere in the city if it's something I find out about. But I've learned a lot. There's a lot that goes into some of these bigger moving pieces in terms of motions being put on tables and discussions happening. And I've spent a lot of time in the last 15, 16 months doing that very thing. Putting motions on the table, getting them approved by council, and moving things forward. Sometimes they're little things like making sure we have more accessibility in the north end on some of the bridges that are there, got some railings installed. That's a small thing, to bigger things like moving the governance forward for the Board of Health to make sure it's more inclusive. But each one of those things mean putting a motion on the table, doing the work, and finding solutions. What I've been surprised about, or what I've seen a lot, is people who just want to vote no to something. People put forward something, they suggest an outcome, and rather than people coming to the table and saying, you know what, I don't love this perfectly, why don't we try to amend this, let's work together and collaborate, people just kind of say, no, I'm voting against that. I'm not going to propose a solution. I'm not going to propose a compromise. I'm just going to say no. And so I thought that was gone with the last council, and to see some people still kind of voting in that way has been really tough to see, because I'd hoped that everyone would have shown up with a super collaborative spirit here, right? Like, At the end of the day, if you're not going to put the motions on the table and you're not going to do the work, it's hard to have a say. So that's why I've showed up and done that. I put many motions forward, and almost all of them were completely unanimously passed by my colleagues.
Well, we've had this discussion with previous councillors because there was such a huge turnover in 2022. You had 10 out of the 15 seats around the horseshoe, and there was a sense of optimism that some of the old guard was out. You know, some people obviously were reelected, but there was this optimism that things were going to move forward quickly in Hamilton. Why do you find that? It doesn't seem to matter the council. It doesn't seem to matter the mayor. Things just move slowly, and sometimes things don't move at all. How can you go back to your constituents and say, sorry, you know what? These ward councillors said no, couldn't get done, nothing we can do about it.
I think a couple things are going on there. One, I do think actually there's quite a lot of collaboration, and I think the majority in council are moving in the same direction on most of the major issues here. So I don't think that's actually what's happening. Okay. I think we can see a couple situations. They've been kind of rare where you've seen a big split vote on something or a lot of dissent. But I got to be honest with you, on the vast majority of stuff, everyone's been on the same page and motions have moved forward. Like I said, I think 95% or more of the motions I put forward as a councillor were approved by everybody around the table. So I think what happens is that sometimes some of the more controversial issues get reported, those get focused on, and we think that that is emblematic of all the work that's happening. It's not. I'm still pretty grateful that there's such a group of councillors around the table who want to collaborate. And the city came up with council priorities, and we said, hey, these are the things that matter to us, and we're making progress on those things. I think part of the trouble is that we're seeing a culture shift slowly happen. We have a new city manager, we have new city councillors, and we're seeing a shift change around the tone of what this job is about. I think for many years the notion or the idea was that councillors were here to deliver your blue box. And I think that kind of politics did a disservice. It was disrespectful to citizens. It told them that everything was just transactional. Right? If I did you a favor, you did me a favor by voting for you. That's not really how I see this job, and a lot of my colleagues share that sentiment, which I'm appreciative of, because we see it as providing service to our constituents, making sure we can answer their questions, solving their problems at a policy level, right? Because what really something like that is telling you, if someone is calling you to say, I need you to drop my blue box off for me, what that really should tell a councillor is, wait a minute, there's maybe something here we can do to improve the service and the policies around here to make this ability to deliver these things easier for people. And the sad thing is, I didn't see the previous council put motions on the table to change the process, right? I see the current council doing that, saying, look, this isn't working. We have to change this. And I'm very hopeful to see a lot of people coming forward to say we want to do it. The budget process was a great example. Radically changed this year, and I hope even more changes come in future years. But we saw something much more open, much quicker, and much more public this year than we've ever seen. So those changes I think are going to continue to come. So I hope to see more of them. One
of the things of the city budget that got a lot of people's attention was increasing the size of councillor staff or the office's staff. You were quite open to the fact that you needed that extra body. You need those bodies. And I think it's because what you're saying there, the city councillors seem to be the first line of complaint, even if it's issues you can't deal with. So how can you justify increasing your office when there is this budget crush, when the 14% number is being thrown around? Why are more staff needed in councillor's office to help solve these problems?
Yeah, it's a great question. And first, I'll say the amount of the increase compared to the size of the budget is so small, I couldn't even repeat it to you. It's less than 1%. And so we're not talking about increases that are having a dramatic impact on homeowners or other kinds of folks who are renting, people paying taxes across our city. That's not what's happening. It's not creating that 14%. And sure, I know the old argument, all the pennies add up. Well, one thing that really adds up is engagement. And we've seen a tremendous amount of engagement in the last 5 years, 10 years. It's changing. And we have to be able to respond to that. We're seeing, of course, people call our office and email our office. Sometimes people send letters to our office. But there's a lot of other kinds of engagement we have to keep up with. And residents expect that my staff and I are going to respond on social media. They expect us to respond to phone calls. They also expect us to show up in the community. So last year we held 27 public meetings. I couldn't have done that work without my staff. And let me tell you, people really appreciated that deeply. I've received letters, I've received communications from people. I've heard from them saying, you showing up to my building to talk to me about affordable housing mattered to me. You showing up in my community and coming to where I am and having this conversation was important. Last week I was with 100 seniors in the North End talking about food insecurity and affordable housing and taxes, and being able to do that comes with having the support in the office to do all the work together. And so I have 2 full-time staff and 1 part-time staff. So it's really an increase of one person. Before, I think it was 1 full-time and 1 part-time.
Yeah.
That extra person allows me to do more work. It allows me to sit on more committees. And as the Ward 2 city councillor, and this may not be obvious to everybody, Ward 2 comes up a lot. The downtown core is on the agenda for every meeting.
Downtown's a big deal, eh?
Yeah, so if I'm not at those committees, and I'm not taking on the extra work of sitting at those committee meetings, I'm not being able to represent residents. I'm having to wait to council for ratification votes rather than sitting there to be part of the conversation, sitting there to listen to delegates when they come forward. And that should be my job. I should be there to represent Ward 2. Yes, it happens to be on all these agendas, so I need to spend the time there. I need staff in my office to be able to help me to do the other work I can't get to while I'm sitting in public meetings.
Well put. Looking at some of the big issues, you mentioned split votes. One of those big split votes happened in a committee meeting a few weeks ago. It's coming up again this week in front of the whole council, I believe. But let's talk about that parking lot in Stoney Creek. Where are you on this? What have the conversations been like since that last meeting? Are you encouraged that maybe some minds might be able to be changed?
I'm hopeful. I remain hopeful that at least one person will change their mind. I echo what the mayor said on the subject about trying to convince colleagues that this is the right decision to make. And people may say, well, a couple of parking lots in Stoney Creek, who cares? This is the first work we've asked our housing secretariat to come back with. We spent years, even in the last council, this work started saying, hey, we want to solve our housing crisis, or we want to use our land assets. And staff said, look, we can't do this work right now because it's all portioned off in different departments, and there's no one here to lead this work. So we said, fair enough. Let's create a division, a housing secretariat, get that person to the table, and let's have them bring forward reports about how we can use our assets. These are already zoned. City lands that have been owned and zoned this way for more than 30 years, and they're prime for building affordable housing. So when they came back and said, here are the 6 different properties, and 2 of them are in Ward 2, by the way, here are 6 different properties to be used for affordable housing, everybody else put their hand up and said, okay, let's do it. I said, sure, let's do it in Ward 2. Yeah. Councillor Huang said, let's do it in Ward 4. Councillor Spatafora said, let's do it in Ward 14. And then we came to Ward 5, and it was, no, we don't want to do this here. And I think that was really unfortunate because it killed some momentum. It sends the wrong message. Yeah. And as you know, other levels of government are watching. They're listening to what councils are doing. They're seeing if they're taking their priorities seriously. Look, we can't go to the provincial government and the federal government and say to them, look, we're here with our share. We've done it. We've put the land up. Now we need your funding. And then say, except we're going to keep these parking lots out of the equation. They're going to say, wait a minute. That's exactly the kind of land that's already owned, already zoned, ready to go, ready to flip, shovel ready that we've been asking you for. And you're going to keep it off the table. They're just going to shrug their shoulders and say, we don't think you're serious about solving this housing crisis. And that's what I'm concerned about. Right?
And I told you that. One of our reporters today was at a St. Catharines housing announcement with the province. Paul Calandra, the housing minister, said, you're going to need to build on parking lots. And here you have this one in Stoney Creek. Would you support Mayor Horvath using strong mayor powers to move this forward?
Honestly, I'm hopeful it doesn't come to that because I think that that's not a great precedent to set. But at the end of the day, that's the mandate from council priorities on the table. She's got that mandate from the province. I was pretty vocal about saying, look, I don't think going down this road is a great idea. I also think we have to balance this issue and say to ourselves, are we going to solve our affordable housing crisis and do everything we can as a city to solve it, or are we not? And that's a challenge she's going to face. I think it'd be far better if she was able to have some conversations, find some compromises with those councillors who are doubting it. And I really want to say this because I think it's important. What I think we should be seeing from every member of council serious about solving this is coming to the table with compromises. Some of the arguments I've heard are about making sure that certain groups can have access to parking. Okay, let's put a motion on the table earmarking the remaining 105 spaces in that lot for those individuals. Let's shift some of the things around here to make the issues that people are concerned about, addressed. And I'm not seeing that coming forward. Instead, I'm just seeing, no, a politics of, no, I don't want to do this, no. And I keep saying, come on, bring us the compromises. Show us your willingness to collaborate. Demonstrate that this is all happening in good faith, and let's work together. And so that's where I'm a little bit disappointed in all this and hope that when we come to the next vote for this, some colleagues say, look, we can make this work, and here's some conditions to help us so we can finally get there and get on with it. Because this is only the first report of the Housing Secretariat. We have many more coming, and if we cast a chill on the work that our staff are doing, it's going to be incredibly hard for us to move forward on this.
Speaking of that, on the affordable housing issue, I know one thing that I'm sure you're proud of would be the rent eviction bylaw that was put in place last year. That's now a model that St. Catharines is thinking of doing. I know it was based on something in BC. That's something that's near and dear to you, especially in Ward 2. How much are you thinking that is something that you can build on throughout, getting more houses built? And how proud are you of that accomplishment of last year?
I'm so proud of the work that Councillor Nan and Councillor Alex Wilson did. I was involved in it, Councillor Maureen Wilson, to get that out there. It's also being done with the maximum heat bylaw, or the adequate temperature bylaw it's called, where we're seeing that it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter in the summers, and we need to be able to provide cooling to tenants. So that's a motion I put forward. These are all building on an acknowledgement that there are a lot of tenants who live in our city. In fact, there are almost 200,000 people out of the 600,000 population who are tenants in our city, 34%. And Ward 2, 77% of the population in Ward 2 rent their homes. Wow. So for me, this is pretty personal in terms of I live in the neighborhoods where a lot of affordable housing are, where a lot of apartment buildings are, hundreds of apartment buildings. And this matters to people, them being able to afford to live, them being able to afford the basics along with their rent. That's becoming a diminishing game for people. They feel trapped in their current homes. When I knocked on doors, that's what I heard a lot was, I don't feel like I can move. If I leave my apartment where I'm paying this level of rent and try to go out into the market and get another apartment, I'm going to be paying 2 or 3 times as much, and I can't afford that. That's a terrible thing to imagine, that the majority of people who are living in the downtown core feel trapped in their homes. And so that's contributing to a lot of problems. Rent eviction bylaws, safe apartment bylaws, adequate temperature bylaws are going to take some time to implement, but when they get there, they're going to provide relief to people, they're going to make people feel safe, and we have to do something, I think, to balance all of our laws, our bylaws and policies to help renters and folks who own property. Because most of our municipal laws and most of the ways that cities have been set up in the past and their origins are around property ownership. But when you have massive amounts of people who have no ability or no future foresight possibility to sort of own a piece of property, we have to start thinking, well, how do we have bylaws and policies to also help them, protect them, make sure that they have their rights upholded? So I think, again, I commend my colleagues and everybody around the table for saying, yes, this is important. Yes, we have to prioritize this. And so I'm super proud of that.
Another issue that's across the city, but concentrated a lot in Ward 2 is the encampment, the homelessness crisis, the mental health crisis. There's no easy solution, but what steps can council be taking on top of affordable housing, on top of making sure people can stay in their homes? Where is the power for council to be doing more than what they're currently doing?
That's a good point. Right now, if you look at the 2023 numbers for housing, homelessness, social housing, that quadrant of spending from the city, we outspent both the province and the federal government combined in 2023. The city of Hamilton is doing its fair share when it comes to spending on this. The problem is it's $1 billion problem, not $1 million problem. I think we tend to think of this as, well, spend $1 million here, spend $500,000 here. Not when it's $550,000 a door for deeply affordable housing. We're not going to catch up anytime soon. So I think we really desperately need support from the province and the federal government. They need to treat this like a crisis. We declared it a crisis. They need to declare it a crisis and need to step up. When they have a surplus, they need to dedicate that money to spending on affordable housing. They're the ones who shut these programs down in the 90s and the 80s, right? And we've suffered 30 years of austerity and no meaningful contributions to catching up on affordable housing. So now here we are. We're at a crisis. It's a tipping point, and it's going to take us a long time to get there. One thing I think we have to do is think about how we support those people who have been deprived of housing. I said this many times before, but nobody woke up and said to themselves, I want to be homeless. People had housing. They were deprived of that housing as they aged. And we have to find a way to support those who have been deprived of housing. Some of that looks like considering what other cities are doing. Toronto's got now this fourth service, not police, not fire, not paramedics, but a group of individuals who are out there able to support people, advocate, support them in mental health issues, connect them to options. We need to start investing in that. So I think, and I'm hopeful in the next year or two to bring forward motions and start having a conversation about what does that fourth service look like? How can we have a service outside of the three traditional services of fire, police, and paramedics who can help us support people until we're done having to manage this problem. Because that's all cities can do, is manage it. We're basically stuck with a situation where we're moving things around, we're contributing what we can, but the federal and provincial governments have to step up. I think, unfortunately, and we've seen it happen on many other topics, it's going to require elections to come be closer before they start rolling out plans to do things. And I'm hoping in the next couple of years, 25, 26, we'll see some major commitments from those governments to cities to help turn this problem around. But we can't do it on our own.
We've talked about a lot of issues today, but give me a reason that in this job, this sometimes thankless job, representing the people of Ward 2, what are you optimistic about? What in these 15, 16 months in this brand new role for yourself makes you encouraged that there is a brighter future for Hamilton, not just tomorrow, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? What are you optimistic about with this city?
Well, a few things. In terms of city council, I see a lot of people working together, putting solutions on the table, fine-tuning things, and trying to move the city forward. We have a new city manager, which I think is an incredible opportunity. But what I continue to see from Hamiltonians is they're engaged. And they're getting more engaged as time goes on. That's really hopeful. I'm seeing hundreds of people showing up to meetings to talk about issues in their neighborhoods, talk about issues that are happening citywide. That's a really encouraging thing. Sometimes when you see people being dissatisfied with government, they kind of retreat, and I worry about that. But Hamilton's got a scrappy reputation for a reason. People want to have their voices heard. I'm very grateful to represent people here. And that's kind of the tone I've been taking in all of this, is that I'm here to represent the people of Ward 2 and the people across the city of Hamilton. And it seems like they really, really do want to see a council that's more transparent, more accountable, more caring, more compassionate. And frankly, I think we've got that council in front of us. So let's build on those amazing strengths we have. Let's work together with the community who really wants to see this city be better, and let's make it happen.
Councillor Kroetsch, I know you're very busy, especially today, so I really appreciate you making the time coming to the studio and talking with us today. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
All right. My thanks to Councillor Kroetsch for joining me today, and my thanks to you as well, because we could not do the show without your support, and my thanks to Mike Corson for directing today's show. Hey, make sure you like and subscribe to CHCH Podcast so you never miss this show or any of the other great shows we have for you, including a brand new episode of Sportsline. That's every Tuesday to Friday with Bubba O'Neill, or a brand new episode of the Trending Now podcast we can catch every Friday. One more time, thank you for joining us. From all of us here at CHCH, I'm Louie Butko. Have a great day.